Tottenham Hotspur have just signed Tell on a permanent deal, but that is not stopping them from finding another winger with very serious links to the likes of Semenyo and Wemo. There's loads more coming through the crack works as we speak. So last time out, I did this video and I was looking at Premier League wingers that I think would suit Thomas Frank's football. So please make sure to go check out that video before watching this one. But in this episode, we are going to be looking across Europe to see if any other leagues are holding any sort of wingers that would also be good for Thomas Frank and Tottenham. So yet again in this video, I'm going to be taking the Thomas Frank and Brentford approach, well, which is now technically the Spurs approach, of focusing on data to try and uncover some hidden gems that we might not know about and see who fits best for his style of play. Now, I think it's very important if you go and watch that previous video I did specifically on Premier League players, mainly because I go into a lot more detail at the beginning, explaining why I'm looking at these certain statistics that you're about to see on your screen. So, as you can see, we're going to be starting off on the right wing. This might look like a lot of information, but I just kind of put this together in a spreadsheet. Like I said, we went through the Premier League ones first. And no surprise, and Wemo sort of came out on top. Still probably one of my top choices, but it does look like he's going to go to Man United, so we do have to look elsewhere. And as you can see here, my second preference really was Yankuba Minter. For someone that's up and coming, I think he'd be a brilliant young player. Kudus came up as third because I think he's just an absolute brilliant, well, he's a demon at taking on players. I mean, he's the only one above 3 per 90 across this whole list. Focusing on the right wing for Ligue 1, and now there's some promising young players. Guys that came up the most across the board for these statistics were Achillea, Bakwa, Ludovic Blas and Zagrova. These two being particularly young and the bottom two a little bit more experienced. So having a look at the sort of players they are, I kind of made notes on the right hand side a little bit. I won't go into too much detail about that. So Achillea is having a very good season with Monaco and sort of excelling. And I mean, he's already got 5 goals, 10 assists. Actually could have got a lot more goals. Successful take-ons is pretty high, very similar to Mbeumo's and even better per 90. But not only that, it's actually it's quite effective. A lot of the times it's leading to shots. 12 shots from a take-on. 0.45 per 90 is the second highest in Ligue 1. Crossing is not so much his forte, as I sort of made in my notes here. So basically, after looking at all this data, this is why it's taken so long to get this video out. I spent a long time watching videos, trying to understand what types of players these guys are, because all of them basically play in different ways. But yeah, he's a very good dribbler, very good with his feet, doesn't really cross that often, and definitely likes to drive and work his way into the box before shooting and passing. But his defensive work rate is really good, and also has 2 goals and 2 assists in the Champions League. So despite being young, he's got experience in the Champions League from last season, which is actually really impressive. But like we said here, one of the most important things, in my opinion, for Thomas Frank is their ability to press and win the ball high up the pitch. He's got 1 less than Mbeumo across the season, but when we look at per 90, it's actually higher for tackles in the final third. So definitely a good player winning ball high up the pitch. Dylan Backwell for Strasbourg is another really good option. He's a little bit more clinical, and as you can see, is sort of like just under per 90 successful take-ons and take-ons leading to shots. However, he has had 1 lead to a goal. But what I will say is backwards crossing is a lot better according to data. Look, 153 crosses, 5.52 per 90 is actually one of the highest, if not, no, it's the highest out of everyone on the list per 90. So potentially someone that could be very useful for breaking down low blocks. Not as impressive numbers when it comes to pressing. And like I made in my notes here, crosses a lot, but also cuts into play pass centrally. Feints a lot to shimmy away from defenders and unpredictable dribbling. Doesn't seem to win tackles high up. Brilliant 1v1 dribbler, but needs to work on finishing and goal threat. Seems really similar to Madueke in terms of dribbling, but needs to work on end products. Seems to be more of a creative winger than a goal threat specifically, and wants the ball at his feet as opposed to receiving balls in behind. Which, like I said, is fine. If we needed someone to sort of break down low blocks, I think he's going to be a good player, and maybe one that can assist others as opposed to getting in the shooting positions himself. So those main ones for the French League. Moving on to the Bundesliga. Now, this is someone that to be honest, I hadn't really heard of before. Ritsu Doan, a Japanese right winger, left-footed. Now, he has impressed me with his stats big time. 10 goals, 7 assists, very clinical player. Has committed a lot of take-ons, well, successful take-ons, should I say. A lot of times leading to shots as well. And also is a pretty decent crosser of the ball, with a lot of them going into the penalty area. Again, pressing stats or tackles in the final third left to be desired, but he's a sort of player that starts out wide, dribbles directly towards goal, and is really good at shooting and crossing from the half space. So, I mean, I'm talking when you see, you know, like the likes of Kulusevski or Saka or Mbeumo, when they're sort of in the half space on the edge of the area and they sort of curl it towards the back post. He is very, very, very good at that. And then, of course, another standout player is Adeyemi for Dortmund, someone that's going to be quite expensive leaving this summer. Really, really, really fast. Not so much someone that will cross the ball. So that's where maybe we need a bit more of a creative outlet on the left-hand side. And then Adeyemi more sort of driving at players directly from the right-hand side. Again, when we look at his per 90 stats, one of the best on this list at tackling high up the pitch. Definitely better suited for a counter-attacking team, which is it's hard to find out what players are going to be good or not because we don't know how Thomas Frank is going to set up Spurs, but I'd say he's probably one of the better options in Bundesliga. In the Serie A, only two for the right side came up to mind, Gustav Isaacson and Francisco Conceição. Sorry, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. He's technically Porto, but was on loan to Juventus last year. That's why his stats are from the Serie A. Francisco's a great dribbler and quite creative as well. He's very quick and dangerous in counter-attacks, but has missed a few games because of injury, and I'm not really sure if he's built for the physicality of the Premier League. Then moving on to La Liga at the bottom here, and three came up a lot. That's Dodi Lukebakio, Takefusa Kubo, and Yeremy Pino were sort of the main ones here. Dodi Lukebakio came up really high on a lot of the stats, and to be fair, is a very tall player for a winger, and I think would be very, very, very suited for a counter-attacking team because, again, he likes to kind of play through the middle a lot, but also carries the ball and dribbles quite well. High volume of crosses, not as high per 90 as some other players maybe, and also not many of them into the penalty area, but he's kind of part of a struggling Sevilla side from last season. Yeah, with them not really getting any European place, there is a lot of talk about him leaving and potentially going to AC Milan, so someone to keep an eye up on. Takefusa Kubo, I think people have mentioned him for the last couple of years now as an up-and-coming player. Very, very good dribbler, very technically gifted, quite small. Remains to be seen how he would handle Premier League football, but as you can see, a very effective dribbler. A lot of the time it leads to shots, it leads to goals. Crosses into the penalty area is quite high as well, and in terms of other La Liga players, has won the most tackles in the attacking third. Still not really high per 90 as someone like Achillea or Ludovic Blas or Adeyemi, but compared to his peers in his league, pretty decent. And then Yeremy Pino is sort of someone who plays on both sides, is a bit younger, and someone that I think we've been linked to in the past as well. But again, I do worry about his sort of physicality and how he would handle the Premier League. Really, really good close ball control. I just do worry that there's a potential that, and I'll put it here, that he could be another Bryan Hill. Someone that is really suited to La Liga football, is very good with his feet, but does he have the physicality to meet the demands of the Prem? I don't know, especially when the focus on Thomas Frank's Brentford, and you'd imagine will be for Tottenham, is being able to win duels high up the pitch. Not so sure he'd be the best for that. And then at the bottom, we got sort of like I was mainly focusing on the top 5 leagues, but it's someone that his name gets thrown around a lot. I was looking at Bakayoko, and his stats come up really high. Whereas the darker green is sort of where it's the best for their league. I've done a tab where it's comparing all of the players to find out who's the best amongst all of them, which we'll get to now. So let's have a look at it overall to see who came out on top. Now, obviously, I haven't included the Premier League players here because we're just focusing on the European ones. But if we scroll along, I've sort of tallied up the points where the dark green is 5, works its way down. You get 1 point for if you're in 5th place, just to see who comes out on top. Now, if I put it in order here, Lukebakio, Ritsu Doan, Achillea, Kubo, and Ludovic Blas came up as the top sort of 5. But I don't think it's necessarily a be-all and end-all because there needs to be a lot of context as to what type of player we really need. Now, even though Dodi Lukebakio came out on really high on top, it wouldn't be a personal priority for me, mainly because I don't necessarily know if we're going to play this counter-attacking football all the time, and I think Johnson is quite suited to that. But he is also very good at dribbling. He's also very tall. He could be suited to someone like Thomas Frank with how he played at Brentford, but again, it's so hard to judge on how we're going to play in the wingers and the type of winger we're looking for. Because if you remember Brentford back when they were in the Championship, he played a lot more dominant football because they had sort of better players compared to other teams in the league. So maybe he'll play a more possession-based game, because he's technically got better players at his disposal. But definitely someone to keep an eye out on, and has come up really high on a lot of these key stats. Although has played the most minutes out of anyone here, so really we do sort of need to focus on their per 90 stats to see how good it is. I mean, he's still really good for dribbling, still good for getting shots off when taking on players. Scored 11 goals, overperforming XG. And again, as you see, even though he's got the highest amount of key passes along here, when we look at, again, per 90, 1.57, it's still lower than Achillea, it's still lower than Kubo, lower than Blas, lower than Bakwa, lower than Bakayoko. Bakayoko is he's the only one not in the Premier League above 2. And he also doesn't press high. This is probably a problem when it comes to the football. Another one, Doan, and this one really surprised me. I think he could be a very, very good player. Definitely one to keep an eye out on, especially with what the stats are saying anyway. Very effective shooter. I think someone that could probably do really well against low block opposition. One of my favourites, I think, is Magnus Achillea, especially because of how young he is, having experience in the Champions League as well. He's got 10 assists this season, clearly heavily involved with goals, with goal creating actions, 19 being the highest. And importantly, is very, very good at pressing. In fact, I think it's higher than Mbeumo's. Mbeumo's is 0.42 per 90. His is 0.56. Kubo, like I said, is good at taking players on. I do just worry about his physicality. Bakwa, I think, is pretty similar to Achillea, where I think it's like an up-and-coming player. I think they're ever so slightly different in terms of how they play. One is clearly better at crossing, as we can see here. Bakwa's crossing is a lot better than Achillea. Achillea likes to drive towards goal. But Achillea is definitely better at winning the ball high up the pitch. Sorry, as you can see here. And look, we can't forget Bakayoko down here as well. He sort of had a bit of an off-season. I know PSV ended up winning the league. Him personally, I know it was a bit of an off-season compared to previous seasons. Again, though, still so young, 22. I think he's almost guaranteed to leave this year. Clearly an effective goal scorer, 0.15 goals per shot. Compare that to an Mbeumo, 0.19. I think Sade's is also 0.17 or 0.18. Underperforming assists, but a lot of the times that's usually to do with the forwards maybe not finishing off the chances. And even though he's not come up green in these sections, again, look at his per 90 stats because he's not played as many minutes this season as some of these others. 2.69 successful take-ons, puts him really high up, puts him just behind Kubo here, puts him ahead of Adeyemi, puts him ahead of a lot of the Premier League players apart from Kudus as well. And more importantly, is very good at crossing the ball into the penalty area and commits a lot of crosses. And also, again, if we're looking at per 90 stats, if he were to have more minutes in another team, 0.51 tackles in the attacking third is better than Mbeumo's as well. So clearly he's good at winning the ball high up the pitch. You kind of expect that from PSV because they would dominate their league a bit more. It's only really them and Ajax. But nonetheless, for someone that's leaving this year, definitely someone to watch out for. Adeyemi is a very, very good dribbler. My only thing is, I think he'd be quite expensive. A lot of rumours of him potentially going to Napoli or other teams as well. No denying very, very, very quick. I just don't see it being necessarily a player that we will sign. So in my opinion, I'm going to go for Achillea as number 1. This is where it's tough because, again, it's like what type of player we want. If we want a really good player for counter-attacking football, a really physical player, then I think Luka Bakayoko would have to be number 2 in terms of preference. And then I think out of the rest of the players, even though Ritsu Doan surprised me as an option. Only plays for Freiburg, so hasn't really had that experience on the European level yet, although has got quite a few goals for Japan. I think he's got 10 goals in 50 appearances, which isn't too bad for a right wing on the international stage. But I think I would lean towards Johan Bakayoko as the third option. I think the good thing about Bakayoko is that he's clearly good at winning the ball high up the pitch. He's a clinical finisher, 0.15 goals per shot. And he's also a brilliant dribbler. So I think he's got a little bit of everything about him. You always have to have a bit of that Eredivisie tax because, oh God, when they missed terribly. But I think for a 22-year-old, he'd be a very, very good option for that right side. And something a bit different to what Brennan Johnson offers as well. So Bakwa's pretty close as well. Really good crossing ability and good dribbling. So to be fair, I'd probably put him as almost like a joint third option. Taking everything into consideration for this right wing, considering I just don't think Adeyemi's attainable, I think the best option from Europe would be Magnus Achillea for right wing. Now let's move on to the left. Now you kind of understand what's going on. I'm not going to spend forever on it. I'm just going to talk through the players that I think came through the highest in each league. In League One, for the left-hand side, for the left wing, I mean, you've got Ben Seguir as a bit of a younger player, 20 years old. Bradley Barcola, it's a bit of a Hail Mary, this one, because I just can't see it happening. It'd cost a lot of money. But there are rumours that he's potentially leaving PSG because of, he's losing minutes out to Desiree Doué, and there's a possibility for someone to make a move there, but I kind of just wanted to put him in there as well as a comparison. This Kitu Nakamura is basically Brennan Johnson 2.0, but for the left-hand side. And I made this note in my little notes here. Scores almost all of his goals from centre of box, but in different ways. Header, ball at feet, crossing coming to back post. Ironically, see him as an upgrade on Sade. Great for a counter-attacking team. Johnson 2.0. Not sure if needed unless we want that on the left-hand side as well. So yeah, not someone I think we'll end up going for. But if any team out there is looking for a Brennan Johnson for the left-hand side, he is your man. Zuriko Davitashvili, I think, is really, really impressive when I was watching him. Not as clinical as some other players, but the Georgian's got 9 goals, 8 assists, really good at dribbling. A lot of the times leading to shots, leading to goals. But I think the pressing ability is something left to be desired. Yeah, he loves getting close to defenders to use his quick feet to go either side of the defender, and actually loves a nutmeg. Like we're looking at like a Dele Alli 2.0 here, but on the wing. Moving on to Bundesliga now. The issue is Jamie Gittens came out like miles clear of everyone. You can see the sort of sea of dark green. Incredible dribbler. I think the interesting thing to note is how different each league is. Like you can see when we look at tackles in the attacking third, how much higher, 13, 16, 17, 12, how much higher that is than these other leagues. 7, 9, 7, 5, 5, 5, 10, 1, 3. Especially in La Liga, it definitely doesn't seem to be like something they do. But yeah, Jamie Gittens would be, I think, the ideal signing from Bundesliga, but he's basically almost guaranteed to go to Chelsea. Nusa is someone that we looked at last year, someone that Brentford also looked at. Very, very young, plays for Norway, scored a really good goal the other day, actually. Kind of just like decent across the board this year, has a lot of injury issues, and also, yeah, like I said, just not really good pressing high up the pitch. Kingsley Coman, naturally another one that came up quite high. Also put him in here because there's rumours of him leaving Bayern Munich this year. Someone with a bit more experience, played Champions League football, but I think he's had a little bit of a decline this season. And then Jean-Mathieu Bahoya is a young French player. He's part of the sort of under-21 setup there. Plays for Eintracht Frankfurt. Actually, I'm pretty sure he played against us in the Europa League last year, and I was quite impressed with them. And he's the highest out of anyone outside the Premier League, along with Bradley Barcola for goals per shot. So clearly a clinical finisher. Not really played a lot of minutes though, so it's a bit skewed. Moving on to the Serie A, I think it's no surprise Leao has literally, look at that, he's won every single category here apart from the final one, which arguably is probably one of the more important ones. But the only reason again why he's in here is because there is talks of him leaving AC Milan this year for about 70 million euros. So I thought it was worth putting in there, even though I just don't see Spurs making a move for him, or him wanting to come to Spurs. It's more for comparison's sake. And the next option was Dan Ndoye. Now, this is someone I think could do really well under Thomas Frank. Quite a clinical player. He's okay at taking people on. I think the good thing about him is he can play on the right and the left wing. And if we see here, is really good at sort of pressing high at the pitch and winning the ball back high at the pitch. But on my notes here from watching him, he turns defenders really well, sort of when they're shoulder to shoulder. He's able to turn them to drive towards goal. Always looking to win fouls with dribbling. Like always, almost, I'd say 50% of his clips are him driving forward and winning free kicks, which I think could be really useful under Thomas Frank, considering that he has such a big emphasis on set pieces and how we can score from corners and free kicks like that. So, look, if he's on the left-hand side, winning the ball, and we're getting more free kicks to sort of score goals, could work really well. Really, really strong on the ball. Really physical player, and is quite quick and can play on both sides. So there's quite a bit to like about him. A little bit of history of muscular injuries, but nothing too major. I think he missed maybe like 10 games from it. 8 goals, 4 assists for Bologna. Someone to definitely keep an eye on. And Benjamin Dominguez was just like the third best for the left-hand side player. But to be honest with you, his stats aren't really that outstanding, to be honest. They're okay. Finally, on to La Liga. Now, this was an interesting one. We've got a bit of a mixed bag of players here. We've got some players that are really good at dribbling. So Malero, Moro, Zaragoza, you can see 2.21 per 90, 2.19, 2.79 per 90. So these guys are very good at taking on defenders. But the pressing aspect and winning the ball high up the pitch, I don't know if it's just a La Liga thing, but the stats across the board for wingers were really, really low. Now, the real interesting one and the most expensive option by far for La Liga is Alex Baena. Now, this guy, he is a quality player, but he's more of a creator. So if that is something that Thomas Frank is after, I think he'd be a very, very good option. 7 goals, 9 assists, actually underperformed his assist this year. Again, might be to do with more of his teammates. Okay goals per shot. Like I said, this guy is definitely more of a creator. Look at that, 207 crosses. I think that would be second to Mbeumo. Really, really high for key passes and the best in the league amongst these players at winning the ball in the final third, although albeit not the best amongst everyone on this list. But yeah, having watched him, is a very, very creative player, and actually I would worry he gets in the way of Maddison a lot. So here's my notes at the bottom here. I'm just going to read them out loud. Very creative player who can play out wide and centrally. Would worry gets in the way of Maddison as he takes up the same positions. So if I bring up both their heat maps here, I mean, that is almost identical. So this is James Maddison and this is Baena. It is actually almost exactly the same. Both take corners from both sides, both operating in this sort of half space on the left side. But Baena does start left wing. So one way I could potentially see it working is if we've got, and again, sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but if we've got Baena on the left, maybe we've got Decky in the middle, sort of more on the right-hand side, and then Johnson on the right. I think that could potentially work because Alex Baena loves to sort of cut into the half space and whip a ball to the other side of the pitch and towards the other side of the box and the back post. So maybe having Johnson at the back post and Baena being the creative player whipping it in could work, but I see him effectively doing the same job that Maddison does, but he's also not as good of a dribbler as someone like Eze. So for me, I just think he'd step on Maddison's toes way too much and would be quite expensive. I think he is the best option here as a signing. I think out of these 4 signings here for La Liga, I think he is the best option. Just to finish this off, to compare across the board, no shot that Alex Baena actually came up on top because, like I said, he is really, really good at sort of being involved in a lot of goals. Like I said, he's definitely a more creative player. So if we are after that sort of player for the left wing, I think he would be brilliant. I'm just not really sure that's the profile we're going for. I think we want a left winger that would be able to be a little bit better when dribbling and taking on defenders in that sense. No surprise that Bradley Barcola came out on top, and I think for me, for the left wing would be an absolutely outstanding signing. I just do not see it happening whatsoever. Zarico Davitashvili came up really high again, so maybe someone to keep an eye out on. Probably looking for players with a bit more experience, which is why I can see why we're linked to so many Premier League players as opposed to ones in Europe. Gittins would have been one of my top choices, but looks like he's pretty much dead set on Chelsea. Rafa Leao, I think he's just someone that has such amazing quality. He is someone that you would want to sign, especially with his wealth of experience. International, Champions League, Serie A. Very, very good player, but I see it as almost an impossible deal to do. But going a bit further down the list, even though his score isn't as high when looking at Dan and Doy, I think this is someone that would fit really, really well for Thomas Frank. Okay, he's not really the best at taking players on, but this is someone that's going to be able to draw you in a lot of fouls and is a very, very good presser of the ball and is really good at turning defenders anyway and can play left wing and right wing and pretty centrally as well. So very versatile player. What I've really learnt from this, and who, with all these players coming out on top in these key statistics, if we aren't going to make a big move for someone like a Bradley Barcola or an Alex Baena or a Rafa Leao, I think the problem is that the sort of drop-off to levels on these other players, the drop-off is quite high. So yeah, I'm going to be honest, outside of the Premier League, the left-wing options aren't fantastic. Look, if I was going to be crazy unrealistic, I think my number one would be Bradley Barcola. Next up is tough. I think, look, if we really wanted this more creative player on the left-hand side to sort of service balls to Johnson on the right-hand side and to Solanke in the middle, I think Alex Baena would be a fantastic option. So maybe he would be number 2. But look, at 23 years old, maybe he would be seen as the successor to James Maddison way down the line. And yeah, like I said, I think for me, Jamie Gittins would be number 1. Does not look like it's going to happen at all because it looks like he's on his way to Chelsea. So next up, I think Dan Ndoye would be my number 3. Especially because of his physicality, the way he can turn players, the way he can win fouls, I think would be really, really, really good. And you know what? I think Bologna have looked pretty decent this season. After doing this video, I think especially for the left wing, the best options are in the Premier League. I think for me, Semenyo still comes out on top across most players. And there's been a lot of chat of us moving towards a more attacking mid and left wing hybrid because we've already signed Tel anyway. So maybe focus is more on someone like Eberechi Eze who can play both, or Xavi Simons that can play both. If a move can't be made for Bradley Barcola or Bina, I don't think it's really worth trying to get anyone else from these lists. And back to the right wing, when comparing with the Premier League, look, my number one, as I said in the last video, would be Bryan Mbeumo. That's looking far less likely now with him potentially going to Man United. I think there's some better options for the right wing for sure. I think my number one would be Achillea, but you know what, Bakwa's a good option. Dodi Luka Bakayoko could be a good option, depending on how Frank wants his right winger to play. And definitely a couple of other players to keep an eye on, like Ritsu Doan, Adeyemi. The options just seem better for the right wing in Europe as opposed to the left wing. Having said that, yeah, I think I still prefer the Prem experience of Mbeumo and the dribbling ability of Mohamed Kudus. And if we wanted to go for a more up-and-coming player, I think Minter would be the best option. So yeah, look, I know that was a lot to cover. There was a lot of players that I went through. I sifted through so many, watched so many videos. I hope that was a bit eye-opening as to why maybe we are being linked to more Premier League players as the ones across Europe, because it really just does seem to be that the best players in Europe are the ones that are quite unattainable, like your Bradley Barcolas, like Rafa Leao. I hope you enjoy these sort of tactical videos. If you want to see more, I'll put the videos right here for you to click on. And yeah, please subscribe as well for more future videos like this one. I will be focusing on attacking mid, CDM, centre back. There's a lot more to come this summer, so make sure to keep your notifications on, and I'll see you guys in the next video.